Hey YouTube, in today's video, you are about to watch a replay from a coaching session I had with some clients where we covered the NFT buyer journey. How do we craft an NFT buyer journey to turn people that are not aware about your project into raging buyers? And if you're an NFT project founder, some of the concepts that are going to be covered in this video are going to be crucial because crafting a buyer journey that is both smooth and effective is really going to be very important as you're developing the strategy as well as the execution of your NFT project. So with that said, enjoy and I'll see you on the other side. Yesterday, I was speaking with this project founder and they have a pretty good product. They have great art, a very famous artist. They're coming in with a pretty decent marketing budget. But one flaw I did notice in the logic of that project founder is that he wanted to launch his entire marketing campaign. The entire marketing of that project, he wanted to execute that in only 2 weeks. So when he said that, Kermit and I looked at each other and we were like, that guy doesn't, like there's something missing here. And what we explained to that guy is that a buyer needs to go through a buyer journey when taking them from someone that's never heard of your project all the way to someone that's bought the project. And we've kind of presented a variation of this to him. And I thought this could be very interesting. Would be a very interesting topic of conversation for today. Because the buyer journey is something that is really taught in marketing. It's something I've learned reading books, taking courses in marketing, and seeing how that applies specifically to the NFT buyer persona really makes this a very relevant conversation for us. So in terms of the NFT buyer journey, there are 3 steps to that. The first one is the awareness stage. This is where people see our project for the first time. They had never heard of us, and for the first time, we're going to put our project in front of them. And this is where they are going to make the decision, either the logical or emotional decision that they're going to want to consider our project. And this is typically done when they either join our Discord or follow our Twitter. This is when they've moved into the consideration phase. And then the final part, which is the consideration. This is where a lot of projects tend to overlook this part because it's during the consideration phase where you're going to take a lot of buyers that are considering your project. Those are going to convert them into actual buyers. And that explains why there are some projects that have 100,000 members on their Discord and Twitter. They don't end up minting out like a project that has 10K on Twitter and 10K on Discord. So 10 times smaller audience, but the smaller projects ends up doing better. And that's because they were able to take people through the consideration phase a lot better. So in terms of what is it specifically that people look for at every stage of this process? So during the awareness phase, you want to think about this as the first impression you make people. This is when you walk up to someone and you introduce yourself. You're like, hey, my name is Leon. The first thing people are going to notice is your art. Do they like it or is it meta? Number 2, do you have a relatable story? And that's one of the big reasons why for everyone here we've worked with, one of the key elements we've worked on is the story, because we want to make this impactful. We want it to connect with people and people to feel like, oh, this is for me. Like this project speaks to me. And finally, word of mouth. And what do I mean by this is, at first I wrote effective marketing channels. And what I mean by this is the ability to use the correct marketing channels to put your message in front of people. But then I realized that this might be something out of our control. But one thing we do have in our control is the ability for people to talk about our project. And this is where we saw, for instance, Art Gobblers yesterday ended up making, they went from a free mint all the way to 15 Ethereum in a couple minutes. That was because they had word of mouth was done very correctly. So the moment you get, for example, a tip in your alpha channel, hey, have you guys checked out Art Gobblers? All of a sudden, people are aware of your project. And this takes them into the consideration phase. And the consideration phase right now, during the bear market, this is where we need to put most of our effort. And I'm noticing the best projects that are performing right now are doing the best job at the consideration phase of their project. So this is where you want to see social proof. You want to show social proof. A lot of people are there. If there's 100,000 people in this Discord, it probably means that those people know something I don't. So I'm going to pay attention to this project. That's the first thing how people think about it. Number two, brand longevity. And what I mean by this is now more than ever, NFT investors, they have become smarter. So they've made a couple bad investments, and they've understood that from now on, they are investing in brands, and they're no longer investing in just meme projects. So they need to see that the project that they're investing in has a long-term roadmap, has the potential to being profitable beyond secondary sales. Because if there is no business model, secondary sales won't even happen in the first place. And the third thing is a qualified team. So people want to see, that's why we've seen the last projects, a couple projects that have been performing on Ethereum, specifically Art Gobblers, probably a label was by Warner Brothers. Art Gobblers was one of the artists of Rick and Morty. So now more than ever, people are looking for a qualified team. And the thing with the qualified team is that you don't have to be a big shot to get a chance at this. But what you need to do is you need to show the qualifications that you are capable of delivering what you're delivering. For instance, one thing that got Art Gobblers on the map was the in-depth white paper they had written. And really that showed, for example, I did not know who the founders of Art Gobblers were before I knew the project. It was only Kermit 3 days ago that told me that one of the founders is actually the artist of Rick and Morty. But people were very bullish about them because they had written a very extensive white paper. And for someone to come up with this probably means that they're going to be able to execute. They have the knowledge and capability to execute on their marketing. So this is where I want to go through a couple examples just to understand that this is just for us to have references over how does this puzzle look like. Because you don't need to have all those elements together, but the more we do, the better. So during the bull market, we saw a lot of FOMO projects come out of nowhere, minted 10K collection at 0.4 Ethereum, ended up making $3, $4, $5 million on their mint. Those projects, what they were betting on, this was kind of the formula, if you want, that they had in place. The first one, they had art that some people connected with, and they had a relatable story. One example I can think about, and that was one project I bought into, was Meta Billionaires. It was all up for the entrepreneurs. It was about helping entrepreneurs kickstart their career into Web3. And this is something I resonated with. In terms of consideration, the only thing these projects had was social proof. They didn't have brand, they didn't have a business model. It was all metaverse, roadmap. And the qualified team wasn't something people were looking at. Most of those projects had undoxed team. The only thing they had was social proof. And that created the FOMO effect, where people just FOMO'd into projects. However, now the market has changed, and this simple formula, just the social proof alone, has stopped working. If we are to look at Art Gobblers, so what does Art Gobblers have? In terms of awareness, they have beautiful art. I mean, art is subjective, but the fact that the artist is the artist of Rick and Morty, they have trendy art. Relatable story, I couldn't really find anything. They weren't much of a storytelling NFT. They were more of a business. So they are building a business that had social proof. So if you guys noticed yesterday, half the influencers in the NFT space were talking about Art Gobblers. Number two, brand longevity. The white paper that they created showed how they planned on making this business profitable. And the qualified team, again, the team speaks for itself. Renga, and other projects that recently came out on Ethereum. Beautiful art, they had that element. Relatable story, word of mouth, it wasn't there. Most people haven't heard of Renga before it launched. And in terms of story, it's mainly an art project. What they did have was social proof and the qualified team. So the qualified team was the artist of Renga, was a very well-established project, was a very well-established artist in the space who had history selling 5-figure ETH. So I think his top-selling piece was 27 ETH on Foundation. And he had, of course, the social proof built with that. And this is very interesting. It's a very good point because this is a very good transition into the phenomenon we saw yesterday on NFT Twitter. If you opened your NFT, your Twitter feed yesterday, you would have noticed that everyone on Twitter was like this. Where did Renga come from? Where did art gobblers come from? It came from nowhere, out of nowhere, and apparently no one had a whitelist to it. And a big reason to that, and this is a very interesting reminder of the 3 types of buyer personas that we have. So remember, the X-Collector, Finny, and Z-Money. And if we notice, most of NFT Twitter is made up of Z-Money. Those are the types of people that are time rich and money poor. So they spend a lot of time on alpha groups on Twitter looking for the next gem, looking for the most underpriced NFT that they can buy and flip. So Twitter is filled with Z-Money. However, Art Gobblers was a project that targeted Finny. They did not try to modify their project to appeal to the mass, which is Z-Money. They were appealing to the smart buyer. And this brings us into the different types of qualifications that those 3 types of buyers look for. So the way the X-Collector looks at projects is different than what Finny looks at, and it's different than what Z-Money looks at. In terms of priorities, the X-Collector, the first thing they want to buy into is a qualified team. Those are the people that are going to buy Beeple's art because it's Beeple. Then they look at longevity, and then social proof is a bonus for them. If the account has 100K followers, it's a bonus. Finny is the type of person that also bought DGOD. They are more risk takers, and they are willing to bet on a new project founder with an innovative business model, if you want. They want to bet on the, the Steve Jobs type of visionary. That's why brand longevity is the first thing they look at. Then we have the social proof. And the third is a qualified team, because they're willing to place a bet on someone that doesn't have history in the space. Just like Frank. I think Frank DGOD is 22 years old. And they were willing to bet on that. Finally, Z-Money. That is the type of persona that FOMOs into projects. The first thing that they look at is the social proof. Then brand longevity, and finally qualified team. And Z-Money tends to be the type of person that buys into projects that doesn't even have a doxed team. And I think it's interesting once we start understanding the types of buyer personas, because especially here we have 3 very incredible projects that are in the building. And each one of you targets a different type of buyer. So understanding those and identifying, okay, what are the traits that we want to show? What are the elements that we want to show in our brands to attract our target buyer? This brings me to the end of the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would love to hear any of your questions.